Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
A New York Times investigative report that goes deep inside the origins of the Trump-Russia probe. You don't see details like this every day. The Times learning about an informant feeding the FBI red-hot material on Trump advisors' ongoing contacts with Russia and what was in top FBI officials' minds when they began this super-secret probe. Here's a clue from none other than Mick Jagger. I was drowned. I was washed up and left for dead. I fell down to my feet and I saw they bled. Yeah. I was crowned with a spike right through my head. If you know those plaintive lines, they are from the Rolling Stone classic, Jumping Jack Flash. And they are relevant tonight because that was the FBI's secret code name for the Russia probe, Crossfire Hurricane. It's from the first line of that ballad. So we know the agents in charge were at least feeling the stones and that they saw a hurricane about to hit the Bureau from being right in the middle of the political crossfire. The Times reports this began in earnest about 100 days before the election. FBI agents going abroad to meet with a foreign diplomat, Alexander Downer, who was reporting evidence of a Trump advisor who got a secret heads up about, yes, the looming Russian meddling designed to hurt Hillary Clinton. And that aide, well, he's now pled guilty. It's George Papadopoulos, and he's cooperating with Mueller, which means Mueller's going to know what he knows. The Times also revealing in the new report tonight that the FBI was basically duping Trump advisors by sending a secret government informant to meet several times with Carter Page and Papadopoulos to find out if they were colluding with Russia. I'm joined by Ambassador Michael McFaul and Malcolm Nance. Malcolm, what do you think of that tool, the FBI, and we only know a little bit, but more than we did before today started, using some kind of informant to glean real-time information from those individuals associated with Trump?
Well, I think it speaks to the fact that they felt that they had a very, very serious situation going on. Papadopoulos, by speaking to Downer, did tip off the FBI through human intelligence all the way around from Australian intelligence to us that they were looking for these Russian emails and that he was communicating with them to find them. But we know from other reporting that there were other sources of intelligence. And when intelligence that comes out of our community gets to the FBI, they have to task out agents and assets to turn that into evidence. And I think by the time you reach that 100-day point before the election, they were hot on the trail between Carter Page and Papadopoulos and probably the other indicators they were getting from the Steele dossier. They really needed to run this down to the ground. And that means they have to use agents in the field who are handling assets.
Ambassador McFaul, reading from this report about Carter Page, who folks have heard about, it's just unbelievable. Russian spies had already tried to recruit Page in 2013, and then he was dismissive when U.S. agents warned him about it. That warning they made even went back to Russian intel, leaving FBI agents suspecting Page had reported their efforts to Moscow. Now, I don't know how you say double agent in Russian, but that wouldn't seem to be someone you want on the inside of a U.S. campaign seeking the presidency.
Correct, Ari. Yeah, of course you wouldn't want that.
It's my thing. I say obvious stuff on the news.
But it's good to say the obvious stuff every now and again, because I think people forget just how extraordinary all of this is. That Carter page was warned, as you said, and that's the way it works. I've been in this world for decades. When they reach out, the FBI reaches out to let you know what they're doing, because maybe you don't understand that world. But for him then to just dismiss it and move on with these contacts, why anybody should have any contacts with any Russians to talk about presidential elections is mysterious to me. But this is a very strange story of which we learned some of the details again today.
Let me read, Malcolm Nance, from another key part of this report, because there's so much in here to digest. FBI agents considering and then rejected interviewing key Trump associates, which might have sped up the investigation, a good thing, but risked revealing the existence of the case. And when agents did take the bolder investigative steps, like interviewing the ambassador, of course, they were shrouded in secrecy. Now, Malcolm, I'm sure you know the expression, real G's move in silence like lasagna. Maybe real G men also move in silence, but at what point was this too much concern about secrecy and not enough concern about catching a potential international conspiracy?
Well, first off, the very fact that they wanted to move at that speed and that they had to be exceptionally careful tells you the level of intensity of the investigation itself. That indicates to me that this is one of the most serious investigations that has been done in modern history.
But to do Monday morning quarterbacking, I know you're an intel guy, so you don't want to pass too much judgment on these tough calls, but were they too concerned about secrecy and not enough on doing things that might have caught this before November?
Well, we are the ones who gave this the catch this before November timeline. The FBI, the counterintelligence officers there, they don't work at that pace. They work at the pace of where they can marry up that global intelligence to turn it into evidence to get us what they may believe is a foreign spy. And that's how this whole thing started, right? With American citizens in contact with foreign intelligence agencies. So to them, this is Aldrich Ames, right? The CIA spy. This is them hunting down what they believe is the ultimate insider threat. They would have to actually see information or already believe that the information they would have about Donald Trump, Paul Manafort, or whoever else could possibly be extrapolated from the involvement with Carter Page. That would take extraordinary measures. They would take phenomenal measures to make sure that this case was the most solid case in the history of America.
It is Thursday, the 17th of May of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Another dish with no Old Bay. Please, leave the Old Bay in the packet. Maybe a little bit of jambalaya would be appropriate. A little bit of spice in your life. Okay, well, speaking of spice in your life, Malcolm Nance really does put his finger on the issue. And this all started as a counterintelligence operation, a crossfire hurricane. But it's all right. It's a gas. Yeah. Hey, have you ever noticed that when a lot of damning evidence to Trump and his whole administration comes down the pike, they being Trump and his administration, his proxies like Rudy, bleat loudly and vociferously and repeatedly that this investigation has gone on too long. Yeah, what's up with Rudy? Mueller doesn't know what's really going on, that there are bigger things than him. Rudy, you got fired from Trautig, whatever, the law firm. Okay, you're done. And Mueller knows. Trust me, he was FBI director. He knows. Isn't that another tell? I mean, we're talking about the former FBI director. We're not talking about Che Guevara here. Okay? I kind of remember Mueller in the Bay Area, and, some of us thought that he was a little rough on certain, I don't know, what we would call liberal concerns during the Bush administration. Well, Mueller is no Che Guevara, as I said, and I think that what's going on here is that some mobsters are in the White House. And the cops are trying to root him out. It takes a little bit of effort because you can't just storm the White House. I mean, when you're talking about White House privilege, it's really expressed when you got somebody like a Donald Trump there. Hey, Donald Trump thinks that little kids and refugees and women and elderly and the infirmed trying to get sanctuary or refugee status, asylum, because they're escaping pestilence and war and death, that those people are the animals. Okay, I know everybody will say, he was only talking about MS-13. Yeah, I know he was. Because MS-13 is a boogeyman. And it evokes all sorts of terrible things about what brown people are capable of. And they're capable of so much evil that they are animals. Well, that says everything we need to know about the humanity of this, this animal that we call Donald Trump. I have no idea. What's that on his head? I think it's like a parasitic thing, but it's a beneficial parasite to him. To everybody else, it looks a little gruesome. Like, why would anybody? Why would anybody? All right. Well, I could go on more about that. There's so much more news out there in the world, but we have curated a bit of a menu here for you. And what will it be? Well, I'll tell you. A Texas family wouldn't pay an IRS phone scammer $5,000. So the scammer called in a fake 911 report of a man with a gun at their house. Swatted them, except the cops didn't send SWAT, though they did send, almost a half a dozen squad cars. Guns could have been ablazing. A Minnesota state senator seeking to be the Republican nominee in the state's upcoming U.S. Senate special election writes laws that benefit her real estate business. Now, is this a possible competitor to the real estate business of Donald Trump, or is this a person that Donald Trump might want to get into his administration? Come crook or high water. I don't know. That's really mixing a lot. Okay. And 2 Democratic House members proffer a bill that would reinstate the White House cybersecurity office that was shuttered by John Bolton. Yeah. The Russians hacked our election. Let's get rid of any way of making sure they don't do it again. Because this Trump administration needs all the help they can get. Just like before. After the break, we move to the chef's table where House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy admitted in a secret meeting that the GOP is opposing immigration reform to keep its racist voters from abandoning the party in November. Like I said, they need all the help they can get, just like before. And scientists suspect someone, somewhere, is making a banned chemical that destroys the ozone layer. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page there is the chat room link. Kelly Lincoln, our roaring girl, does monitor that throughout the day, so do engage us there. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com are the contribute donate buttons, and we are unable to do this without you, so thank you so much for your generosity. And the lights are still blinking in their proper order, and that's the way they like it. So if they don't like it, apparently I've noticed the lights don't blink in their proper order, and you don't hear them and they don't hear you. It's like magic. Almost like magic. Well, follow Netroots. Follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. We are also on Facebook if you choose to do that. You know, I stupidly took some photographs of the garden and the grounds here at Positively 3rd and Marine, and posted them on Facebook for family and friends. And I think that I kept it for family and friends rather than just going out in the public, because you'd hate to have somebody come by and, you know, not like you. Which has happened before in other places, even before the internet. Yeah. Stand up for civil rights and the equality of people, and the next thing you know, there's others that just want you to not live. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and show notes and links are on my diary that I post about 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Co's, where you can find me as Justice Putnam. So do that. And there are links also in all the appropriate social media platforms to the show notes and links, so you can get there somehow if you haven't figured out how to search in the Daily Co's world. Podcasts, yes, podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be had by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. All right. This article here by Sarah K. Burris out of Raw Story could have turned out rather dangerously, tragically. But fortunately, it didn't. 15 police squad cars poured into the neighborhood of one Arlington, Texas family's neighborhood after a hoax call of a man with a gun came into 911. Police drew their weapons and demanded everyone in the house come up with their hands up. Luckily, no one was killed. But given past incidents of police shootings, the story could have ended in a different way. Like, I wonder if the family was white. Because usually if you're black, you're dead. Police ultimately discovered the call to 911 came from a masked phone number, and the family thinks it was a fake IRS scammer that had called earlier. 1-800 number had called them impersonating an IRS employee and demanded $5,000. The family didn't believe it and refused to pay. But the scammer threatened to send police to the home if they didn't cough up the cash. And I gotta tell you, somebody tells me that, I'd say bring them on. No, you don't do that anymore. It's sort of like back in the day, you could flip somebody off, if they cut you off in traffic. Now, if you do that, they might want to kill you and all the people around you that they hit when they're missing you until they finally hit you, because they have guns that keep shooting until they finally can shoot you. You don't need to be a good shot anymore, just a lot of bullets. He who has most bullets wins. Everybody knows that. So, this is just insane. And then the squad cars were called in, and they put two and two together. Now, this is also, as we know, called swatting. This has happened quite frequently. We've spoken with Izzy Galvez about this particular incident years ago when I was doing another show here on Netroots Radio. Well, investigators are currently searching for the person who made both the scam call and the swatting call. Meanwhile, police are urging people not to engage with scammers at all and to simply hang up. Now, I bring this article up because I've been having an argument with my mom about not engaging with scammers on the phone when they call up, knowing that there's an elderly woman there that maybe they can part her money, just take it from her. And I've had to deal with these people, and they're insistent. And, I know the tricks, too. I got to tell you. But swatting, it's taking it to a different level now, isn't it? Danielle McLean of Think Progress has penned this next offering here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, by the way. Karen Housley, a Minnesota state senator, who is seeking to be the Republican nominee in Minnesota's upcoming U.S. Senate special election, is a prominent realtor who does brisk trade selling $1 million homes in the suburbs outside of Minneapolis. And since 2014, she has worked nearly as hard at creating numerous bills affecting her real estate business. Well, she's just working for her constituency, and she's a constituency of one. I mean, have you ever worked with real estate agents before? Trust me. Yeah, they'll pay a desk fee, and they'll pay the E's and O's, but they're really out on their own. As a member of the Minnesota State Senate, Housley authored bills that literally crafted the definition of her very profession and established designated agency during real estate transaction. Well, designated agency just really means who is the lead agent. And, so you get all the listings yourself, coming and going. Some states don't allow that, representing both sides, because there's an inherent conflict there. But you never know. She authored an act that established a first-time home buyer savings account, which was touted by the state's Real Estate Political Action Committee as a major legislative success. And she wrote bills benefiting the real estate appraisers that set the prices of the homes she sells, including new protections against civil action lawsuits and shielding minor disciplinary action against them from the public record. For those of you old enough to remember, during the savings and loan fiasco, I know we're supposed to be lionizing John McCain, but he was in it, pretty deep. So was Ellen Cranston too. So hey, I'm just, I'm not protecting one side over the other. There were a few that got involved in that whole savings and loan scam, and part of that was real estate appraisals that. We're inflating property values. And there was a bit of subterfuge going on, and regulations were then imposed on the real estate appraisal industry, like certification. You couldn't just hang up a shield and call yourself a real estate appraiser. Now, appraisers usually came from the banking industry, so you had to have some sort of networking with banks, and they were the ones that usually sent you out. And then appraisers went out on their own. So it always astounds me when how soon they forget. I mean, do real estate agents really want to have, or realtors really want to have the kind of crimes that existed back in the day that were going to collapse our economy? Because then it ballooned into the housing bubble later, and the same thing happened. Appraisers and banks not doing diligence, and in fact, embarking on criminal activity. But that's okay. She's writing these these bills that benefit her personally. She's been a staunch supporter of the Trump administration and its anti-abortion policies, of course. And let's not forget that Richard Painter, a former White House ethics attorney under the Bush administration, recently announced that he's going to switch political parties and challenge Tina Smith, the true Democrat. So Painter's going to run as a Democrat. And they are going to be fulfilling the rest of Al Franken's term that ends in 2020. So, yeah, well, all sorts of connections here that I'd like to bring up about how Al Franken is no longer in the mix. In fact, we almost forget him. But this is what we're going to get if we're not careful. The concern about Richard Painter running against the true Democrat that Governor Dayton had actually picked, Tina Smith, looks like that might split the vote, as they say. So we will have to keep tabs on this. I think that she would fit right in because she doesn't even have to go to ALEC to write these bills. Here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursday is by Melanie Schmitz, also of Think Progress. Now, let's remember the decision to scrap that cyber coordinator role at the White House came in response to pressure from this national security advisor guy, John Bolton, you know, with the funny mustache. Yeah. I don't know how that's allowed in the Trump White House. I thought facial hair was verboten, and I mean that literally because they say that in the Teutonic click of the heels too. Well, a pair of Democratic congressmen have introduced a bill meant to reinstate a key cybersecurity position in the White House after National Security Advisor John Bolton eliminated the role on Tuesday. Jim Langevin, Democrat of Rhode Island, and Ted Lieu, Democrat of California, introduced the bill and would create a permanent director of cybersecurity policy within the White House, a position that would coordinate cyber policy measures across the many government agencies and recommend security measures and budgets for those agencies in collaboration with the administration. This was a position put in by Obama. And, of course, they got to get rid of everything that has the stink of the black man on it. And this one certainly does, because this would root out actual crimes being committed by foreign actors. And when you're in cahoots with those foreign actors, the last thing you need is somebody finding out about it. And what better way to keep people from finding out about it than to eliminate the position? So they've had 3 excellent cybersecurity coordinators since the late Howard Schmitz originated the position. And it is an enormous step backwards to de-emphasize the importance of this growing domain within the White House. Yes, indeed. In addition to securing a permanent office in the White House, the bill would also establish a Senate-confirmed director of the office with responsibility for recommending security measures and budgets for federal agencies, coordinating issues relating to cyberspace across the government, while promoting civil liberties and decentralizing defense of federal information infrastructure in the event of a large-scale attack. Well, the decision to scrap the role, a role previously held by current acting Homeland Security Advisor Rob Joyce, who left the post in April, but plans to return to the NSA later this year, was reportedly the result of repeated pressure from National Security Advisor John Bolton. He says the effort is meant to streamline authority. Yeah. Streamlined authority usually means, hey, checks and balances, screw you. Checks and balances, we don't need no checks and balances. And they don't need no cybersecurity czar either, apparently. Well, it comes as an especially curious time, considering on May 3rd, the Defense Department announced it would be elevating U.S. Cyber Command to a combatant command, putting it at the same level as other unified combatant commanders and allowing Army Lieutenant General Paul M. Nakasone to report directly to Defense Secretary James Mattis. Well, just as our military must be prepared to defend our nation against hostile acts from land, air, and sea, we must also be prepared to deter and, if necessary, respond to hostile acts in cyberspace. That was Pentagon spokesperson Dana W. White. Well, previously Bolton had advocated for a stronger cybersecurity front, but not anymore. Added former Obama administration cyber policy advisor Ash Carter. If you're covered in gasoline, be careful when throwing matches. Indeed. Well, they're going to get burned, and we know. They've singed themselves quite terribly already. We can smell it. Okay, enough of that. Let's get to our break. We'll come back, and we will go through weather from around the world and then finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, I'm Scientific American podcast editor Steve Mirsky, and here's a short piece from the May 2018 issue of the magazine in the section we call Advances, Dispatches from the Frontiers of Science, Technology, and Medicine. Orangutan Medicine by Doug Main. Medicine is not exclusively a human invention. Many other animals, from insects to birds to non-human primates, have been known to self-medicate with plants and minerals for infections and other conditions. Behavioral ecologist Helen Morag-Bernard of the Borneo Nature Foundation has spent decades studying the island's orangutans and says she has now found evidence they use plants in a previously unseen medicinal way. During more than 20,000 hours of formal observation, Morag-Bernard and her colleagues watched 10 orangutans occasionally chew a particular plant, which is not part of their normal diet, into a foamy lather and then rub it into their fur. The apes spent up to 45 minutes at a time massaging the concoction onto their upper arms or legs. The researchers believe this behavior is the first known example of a non-human animal using a topical analgesic. Local people use the same plant, an unremarkable-looking shrub with stalked leaves, to treat aches and pains. Morag-Bernard's co-authors studied its chemistry. They added extracts from the plant to human cells that had been grown in a dish and had been artificially stimulated to produce cytokines, an immune system response that causes inflammation and discomfort. The plant extract reduced the production of several types of cytokines. The scientists reported the finding in a study published in the journal Scientific Reports. The results suggest that orangutans use the plant to reduce inflammation and treat pain. Such findings could help identify plants and chemicals that might be useful for human medications. In creatures such as insects, the ability to self-medicate is almost certainly innate. Woolly bear caterpillars infected with parasitic flies seek out and eat plant substances that are toxic to the flies. But more complex animals may learn such tricks after an initial discovery by one member of their group. For example, an orangutan may have rubbed the plant on its skin to try to treat parasites and realized that it also had a pleasant pain-killing effect. That behavior may then have been passed on to other orangutans. Because this type of self-medication is seen only in south-central Borneo, Marogue Bernard says it was probably learned locally. That was Orangutan Medicine by Doug Main.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, given on November 19, 1863, recognized the central importance of founding-era principles to the meaning and destiny of America. He noted that 87 years had passed since the birth of a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He praised the men who fought and died at the Battle of Gettysburg for the ideas that have united and sustained the American people, and he urged his fellow citizens to resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth in freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. These elegant words signify the enduring legacy of Abraham Lincoln to the people of America. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
Does the Constitution require a unanimous verdict in a criminal case? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The answer is yes. And no. Yes in all federal criminal prosecutions because the Sixth Amendment says so. But not necessarily in state court prosecutions because the Supreme Court has ruled that the right to a unanimous jury verdict is not so fundamental that it is binding on the states. Most rights in the Bill of Rights are binding on the states through the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause, which says, quote, "No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." But not a unanimous verdict in a criminal case. That's an oddball exception. That said, almost every state, 48 to be exact, require unanimity in all criminal prosecutions. The exceptions are Louisiana and Oregon. And in Louisiana, the legislature and the voters soon will determine whether it will change its rule that 10-2 is good enough to convict a person of a felony in that state. The proposed change should pass. As the recent New York Times editorial on this topic put it, quote, "Majority rule is good when it comes to the democratic process, but it's not enough when someone's constitutional rights and liberty are at stake." The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Thursday, May 17th, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger. May 17th is International LGBTQI Day, a day set aside to remind people of the rights and challenges of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, and intersex persons. To find out how the labor movement is fighting for LGBTQI people, I talked to Sandra Vermaten. Ms. Vermaten is the head of campaigns for Public Services International. PSI is the global union which represents public sector unions around the world. I asked Ms. Vermaten first why a labor organization like the PSI fights for the rights of LGBTQI people.
Well, of course, PSI defends the rights of all workers, irrespective of their cultural, racial, or sexual identity. We think that every person has a right to express themselves in the way they are. It's their human right, but it's also about, especially as public service workers, to both integrate those values in the way we provide services to people, but also inside our trade union movement. So this is really for us a very, I think would say, an intrinsic part of our work. We think that a union that defends LGBTQI workers is a progressive union, and that's the movement, that's the trade union movement that we stand for.
I know it's a vast and complicated issue, but what are some of the major challenges faced by LGBTQI people in the workplace?
Well, of course, I think the first one is that still, even today, a lot of LGBTQI people hide. I mean, they stay in the closet. They hide their orientation because of fear of retribution, fear of being discriminated against. So they can never really be honest about what's really defining their life in a certain way. Then once people actually know that they have another sexual orientation, they can actually get very much discriminated against. Of course, I mean that there are many different forms of discrimination. In some extreme cases, it can lead to suicidal ideas or even to suicide, violence at work. And besides that, just a lack of recognition for the family status of people. I think that's not a healthy situation. So those are the kind of issues that we have to fight against, and that we have to make people aware about, that it's not okay that we have to provide an environment that is inclusive, that recognizes the right of everybody to happiness without any difference in terms of who it is that they share their life with.
What do trade unions do to help LGBTQI workers?
What is it that trade unions do? In the first case, of course, collective bargaining. So integrating LGBTQI workers' rights in collective bargaining. So recognition of same-sex relationships, of fighting against discrimination against those workers at the workplace, we think is very important. At the same time, also ensuring representation of these workers within our organizations, and leadership speaking out against discrimination, but also for diversity, in favor of diversity as an added value for our movement, I think is very important. I think that it's really important to note that while there has been a very positive development in the last 20 years in terms of recognition of LGBTQI rights and all same-sex relationships, also in terms of marriage rights. In the year 2000, there was not a single country in the world where such marriages were possible, but now there's, I think, almost 20. At the same time, there's 70 countries in the world where same-sex relationships are still criminal. And I think that's something that we also have to work. That's a really important campaigning issue for the global trade union movement and for anybody who has a human rights agenda.
We've been talking about the rights and challenges of LGBTQI people in general, but specifically, what has the PSI been doing to help them?
I think in the first place, we've been creating a network of both members, activists, and leaders that either identify as LGBTQI or are supporters of diversity policies within the trade union movement, just to visibilize the fact that, yes, we care about this issue.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. European officials are voicing their frustration with the Trump administration's Iran policy. In remarks on Wednesday, European Council President Donald Tusk was unsparing in his characterization of the transatlantic alliance, saying the EU must unite to defend its economic interests from the US.
With friends like that, who needs enemies? But frankly speaking, Europe should be grateful by President Trump, because thanks to him, we have got rid of all illusions. He has made us realize that if you need a helping hand, you will find one at the end of your arm.
Meanwhile, in Brussels, the foreign ministers of the UK, Germany, France, and Iran met and agreed to a 9-point plan to try and preserve the Iran deal by making sure trade ties aren't disrupted by US sanctions. One such protective measure could go into effect soon. As Russian media reports, European countries could start purchasing Iranian oil in euros, not US dollars. Some European officials have even suggested the EU trigger a 1996 rule known as the blocking regulation, which aims to limit the effect of international sanctions that the EU doesn't agree with.
That regulation could even allow European firms to sue the U.S. Treasury for sanctions damages and possibly seize U.S. assets in Europe. Europe can try to persuade companies to keep dealing with Iran, but just the threat of U.S. sanctions is already having a chilling effect on investment. The French energy giant Total said Wednesday it will cease operations in Iran by November in order to avoid possible sanctions, while the Danish shipping firm Maersk and the German insurer Allianz have also signaled their intention of pulling out of Iran unless the companies can secure sanctions exemptions from Washington. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. And why don't we go ahead and dive right into the weather? And we always like to begin along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit. We are slated for a high a little bit warmer than yesterday. Weather Underground says much warmer. Well, we're going to go up to about 78 to 80 today, at least here at the mothership at Positively 3rd and Marie. And winds currently are light and variable out of the southwest, though tonight they will be shifting out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, increasing, though small, very small chance of rain. Through now until next week and next Thursday, we are expecting to have showers, but that's 7 days ahead. That could change. But we are in the disruptive atmospheric conditions in which hot and cold air and moisture mix together, and the next thing you know, thunderclaps with minerals falling from the sky during the flashes is quite stunning, especially the sound. You can feel it in your chest. So we'll look forward to that. Temperatures will be hovering in the upper 70s, low 80s for the foreseeable future. Okay, might have a little gathering. My brother's birthday was, May is tough. May is tough. There are so many birthdays in May, plus Mother's Day. My mom's birthday's always around Mother's Day. My brother's just happened to fall on Mother's Day. My younger sister's is in May, and that just happened a couple of days ago. I got nieces and nephews and friends, and oh God, May, it's tough. It's worse than Christmas. So, but other than that, we're going to have a fine day, and we will have a little gathering in the park-like abode in which, I reside here at Positively 3rd and Marie. Okay. Let's see here now. Grass pollen is still high. I knock on wood. As soon as I say I don't get grass pollen allergies, I will. So I'm not even going to say it. But I will say that the UV index is very high at 8. So if you're seeing those numbers in your area, take care. And if it means like the thick zinc oxide, just do it. Who cares what people think? Yeah, truly, your life is much more important. And your comfort, too. Pressure is holding steady at 30 inches. We are overcast. Weather Underground calls it cloudy. I call it overcast. Visibility is at 7 miles, and humidity is at 87%. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 62 and sunny. Paris is 67 and sunny. Rome is 69 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 75 and fair. Kabul is 60 degrees and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 78 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 72 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 55 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York is 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're raining right now, New York. And at least somewhere. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere in their property. And these people positively live around the world. Oliver Willis at Share Blue Media penned this first offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Kevin McCarthy has warned his party they will lose if they anger their racist voters. In a secret meeting with House Republicans, Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy pushed back against passing immigration reform, warning that the party needs its racist voters to keep its majority. They need all the help they can get. They can't get, it's not all from the Russians. All of these pieces need to fall in order. They put their pieces on the board. They can't do it without a rook. And they certainly can't do it without a bishop. And you got all those pawns, too, that you got to give up. Political reports that McCarthy is echoing House Speaker Paul Ryan in opposing a discharge petition promoted by one group of Republicans that would force a vote on DACA. If the vote proceeds, McCarthy explained, it would discourage members of their base with an antipathy toward Latinos. We need to keep the hate up of the Mexicans. Brown people. Brown people is selling right now. You know that. Hate of brown people is a big seller. We can't roll out another hate. This one's doing so good. Don't fix it if it's not broken. If, intensity levels are still not there, McCarthy noted. He says such petitions release the power of the floor that the American people gave us. They gave us the responsibility to hold that floor. Really? Should immigration reform pass the House ultimately, McCarthy said, the majority goes to Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi. He insisted, if you want to depress intensity, this is the number one way to do it. And again, fearfully referenced Pelosi, who would likely become Speaker again if Republicans lose their majority. We can't let a woman, not that woman, take over the speakership again. No, she's from my own state. I can't take it. No. The blunt, albeit private, admission from McCarthy comes as he is in the middle of an internal Republican battle to succeed Ryan as Speaker. Of course, let's not forget, in another secret meeting that was recorded too, McCarthy divulged that the only two people who were taking more money from the Russians was Rohrbacher and Donald Trump. And everybody nervously laughed because they knew, because Trump was taking a lot of money and they were taking somewhat less than what Trump was taking. They were all in on it, and they all chuckled. Okay, like John Boehner before him, Ryan was obstructed to vote on immigration reform, even when passage of legislation that could provide relief to millions of families was supported by millions of Americans and would have been signed into law by President Barack Obama. But the Republicans obstructed and held up votes, didn't let any judicial nominees go through. Isn't that funny how that works? I wonder if the Republican Party will now require proficiency in Cyrillic to be a member. Well, now we know, Oliver Willis here continuing. Thanks to leaks from the secret meeting, McCarthy has conceded that the calculus behind the strategy of appeasing racist voters is simply a ploy to keep the GOP's majority. If Republicans retain the House and leaders like McCarthy stay in power, it's a clear sign such appeasement will continue. But that's looking like a bigger if every day.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Okay, last up here at the Chef's Table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays is Out of the Washington Post by Chris Mooney. Emissions of a banned ozone-depleting chemical are on the rise, a group of scientists reported yesterday, suggesting someone may be secretly manufacturing the pollutant in violation of an international accord. Emissions of CFC-11 have climbed 25% since 2012, despite the chemical being part of a group of ozone pollutants that were phased out under the 1987 Montreal Protocol. I've been making these measurements for more than 30 years, and this is the most surprising thing I've seen, said Stefan Monska, a scientist with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who led the work. I was astounded by it, really, he continued. It is a distressing result amid what is widely seen as a global environmental success story in which nations, alarmed by a growing ozone hole, collectively took action to phase out chlorofluorocarbons. Remember those days? Yeah, well, it's back. I guess somebody needed these CFCs to put back into the Freon that's been banned into their refrigerators, apparently. I guess there's a lot of old refrigerators that need it. So they have a demand. Now, there is a small chance there is a more innocent explanation for the rise of CFC-11 emissions, the scientists say. They considered a range of alternative explanations for the growth, such as a change in atmospheric patterns that gradually remove CFC gases in the stratosphere, an increase in the rate of demolition of buildings, continuing old residues of CFCs, or accidental production. But they concluded these sources could not explain the increase, which they calculated at about 13 billion grams per year in recent years. Rather, the evidence strongly suggests a new source of emissions. These considerations suggest that increased CFC-11 emissions arise from new production not reported to the Ozone Secretariat, that's part of the UN, by the way, which is inconsistent with the agreed phase-out of CFC production in the Montreal Protocol by 2010. Now, CFC-11 was used primarily for foams. It can last up to 50 years in the atmosphere. Once it is released, it is destroyed only in the stratosphere, which is some 9 to 18 miles above the planet's surface, where the resulting chlorine molecules engage in a string of ozone-destroying chemical reactions. That loss of ozone, in turn, weakens our protection from ultraviolet radiation of the Earth's surface. Well, I guess everybody wants that, don't they? And, of course, the chemical is also a powerful greenhouse gas that contributes to global warming, which is fake news. Everybody knows that. Well, the ozone layer has been slowly recovering, and ozone-depleting substances are still declining, but the apparent increase in emissions of CFC-11 has slowed the rate of decrease by about 22%, the scientists found. This, in turn, will delay the ozone layer's recovery, and in the meantime leave it more vulnerable to other threats like, volcanoes all over the place. Well, that does bring us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but hopefully not for the end of all time. Okay? We'll promise as well as we can that we'll be back here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. That's right. So do stay tuned to the rest of the day for breaking news as it breaks on Netroots Radio, with our live national and international feeds at your ready. So do that, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.